What if I told you that your local grocery store might soon have empty shelves, that the foods you take for granted today could become luxury items tomorrow? This isn't science fiction, it's becoming reality for millions of Americans right now in 2025. Welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving deep into a crisis that's quietly spreading across America: food shortages. While the mainstream media is distracted by political drama and celebrity gossip, we're witnessing the beginning stages of what could become the biggest food security crisis in modern American history. The numbers are shocking. According to the latest data, over 47 million Americans are facing hunger, including 1 in 5 children. That's right. In the world's wealthiest nation, 20% of our children don't know where their next meal is coming from. And the situation is getting worse by the day. Food insecurity rates have jumped dramatically in urban areas to 15.9% and in rural communities to 15.4%. Behind these cold statistics are real families making impossible choices between paying rent, medical bills, or putting food on the table. What's even more concerning is that this crisis isn't evenly distributed. Some cities are becoming epicenters of food insecurity, with their residents facing increasingly desperate situations. Today we're exposing the 16 American cities where food shortages have reached crisis levels, and warning signs that your city might be next. Let's start with Detroit, Michigan. Once the proud heart of American manufacturing, Detroit has been battling economic challenges for decades. But now the situation has reached a breaking point. Federal funding cuts have hit Michigan food banks particularly hard. According to recent reports, Michigan food banks are in crisis mode after the freezing of federal food programs. Without immediate action, thousands of Detroit residents face severe food insecurity. The city's high poverty rate, combined with limited access to full-service grocery stores in many neighborhoods, has created vast food deserts where residents must travel miles just to find fresh produce. Many rely on convenience stores with limited, expensive, and often unhealthy food options. Community initiatives are trying to fill the gaps, but they're overwhelmed by the growing need. Moving south to Memphis, Tennessee, we find a similar story playing out. This vibrant city, known for its musical heritage, is struggling with one of the highest food insecurity rates in the nation. Memphis has been hit particularly hard by recent USDA funding cuts that have eliminated millions of meals from food banks across the country. The city's poverty rate exceeds the national average, and many neighborhoods lack access to affordable, nutritious food. Transportation barriers make the situation worse, as many families without reliable vehicles struggle to reach distant supermarkets. Local food banks report a 35% increase in demand since last year, while their resources have been dramatically reduced by federal funding cuts. In the Southwest, Phoenix, Arizona is facing its own perfect storm of food insecurity factors. Despite being in the Sun Belt, Phoenix is experiencing food shortages driven by extreme heat and drought conditions that have devastated local agriculture. The Arizona Department of Economic Security recently allocated $1.25 million to combat food insecurity in southern Arizona and tribal lands, but experts say this won't be nearly enough to address the growing crisis. With temperatures regularly exceeding 115 degrees Fahrenheit in recent summers, outdoor food distribution has become dangerous, limiting when and how aid organizations can operate. The city's rapidly growing population is straining already limited resources, with many newcomers unaware of the food security challenges they'll face. Few cities embody the food crisis more starkly than New Orleans, Louisiana. Still recovering from multiple hurricanes and the long-term impacts of climate change, New Orleans is seeing food insecurity reach unprecedented levels. Recent reports indicate that up to 250,000 kids in Louisiana may struggle with food insecurity this summer alone. The city's unique geography makes it particularly vulnerable to climate disruptions that affect food supply chains. Recent flooding has destroyed local crops and disrupted transportation routes, causing food prices to spike. Councilmember Moreno has spearheaded a SNAP assistance initiative to tackle food insecurity, but the need far outpaces available resources. Low-income families are particularly vulnerable, with many spending over 40% of their income on food, far above the national average. Chicago, Illinois presents a troubling contradiction, a major food industry hub where hundreds of thousands still go hungry. The city's extreme economic inequality has created a tale of two cities, one with abundant food resources and another where residents struggle to meet basic nutritional needs. While Chicago is investing in urban agriculture, transforming rooftops and vacant lots into food sources, these initiatives can't keep pace with the growing need. The city's harsh winters create additional challenges as outdoor food distribution becomes difficult during the coldest months. Ethnic and racial minorities in Chicago are disproportionately affected, reflecting broader patterns of inequality in access to resources. Houston, Texas, America's fourth-largest city, is experiencing food insecurity at alarming rates. Recent USDA cuts have severely impacted the Houston Food Bank, one of the largest in the country. These cuts threaten to eliminate millions of meals for vulnerable Houstonians at a time when demand is surging. Food insecurity is present across all Houston's communities, but affects racial and ethnic minorities at disproportionately higher rates. Climate change is exacerbating the situation, with increasingly severe hurricanes and floods disrupting food supply chains. The city's sprawling layout creates transportation barriers for those without vehicles, making food access even more challenging for low-income residents. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania tells a particularly heartbreaking story. Recent data shows that 1 in 7 Philadelphians, including 1 in 3 children, face hunger. This historic city is battling complex, overlapping challenges that intensify food insecurity. According to local reports, 13.5% of Philadelphia households experienced food insecurity in 2023, and that figure has only grown in 2025. Initiatives like the Cesar Under Iglesias Community Garden are trying to blend emergency food relief with long-term solutions, but they can only serve a fraction of those in need. The city's aging infrastructure and limited public transportation create additional barriers for residents trying to access food resources. Many neighborhoods lack a single full-service grocery store, forcing residents to rely on expensive corner stores with limited nutritional options. Atlanta, Georgia might project an image of prosperity, but food insecurity lurks just beneath the surface. As federal aid shrinks, Black-led food justice movements have stepped up to combat hunger and inequality in the city. Food insecurity is surging to crisis levels across Atlanta's communities as federal food assistance programs face deep cuts and school meal rollbacks accelerate. The city's rapid gentrification has pushed low-income residents farther from food resources, creating new food deserts in previously stable neighborhoods. Summer brings additional challenges as families who rely on school meals struggle to feed children during vacation months. Climate change is introducing new uncertainties, with unseasonable freezes damaging local crops and disrupting regional food supplies. St. Louis, Missouri is facing a severe food security crisis that has largely escaped national attention. Leadership at St. Louis area food pantries is worried that cuts at the U.S. Department of Agriculture might jeopardize their services at the worst possible time. The city's extensive food deserts force many residents to travel miles for fresh produce, an impossible task for those without reliable transportation. Historical segregation patterns have created stark disparities in food access along racial lines. Recent floods have damaged agricultural areas surrounding the city, causing food prices to rise while local production decreases. Community initiatives are struggling to fill the gaps, but volunteer numbers are declining just as need increases. Cleveland, Ohio is experiencing a food crisis intensified by recent federal cuts. Millions of pounds of food headed to the Greater Cleveland Food Bank have apparently been canceled amid these cuts, creating an immediate emergency for thousands of families. The city's industrial decline has left many neighborhoods without economic anchors, including grocery stores. Winter weather creates additional challenges, as snow and ice make food distribution and transportation more difficult. Many elderly residents on fixed incomes are particularly vulnerable as food prices continue to rise faster than Social Security adjustments. The opioid crisis has created a generation of children being raised by grandparents who struggle to afford adequate nutrition on limited retirement incomes. Miami, Florida might conjure images of beaches and luxury, but many residents are facing a growing food insecurity crisis. South Florida chefs are joining culinary colleagues nationwide in urging Congress to protect children from going hungry as federal nutrition programs face cuts. Climate change poses a unique threat to Miami's food security, with sea level rise and increasingly powerful hurricanes threatening local agriculture and disrupting supply chains. The city's high cost of living forces many families to choose between adequate housing and nutritious food. Cultural and language barriers prevent some immigrant communities from accessing available food assistance. Tourism-dependent jobs often provide inconsistent income, making household food budgeting particularly challenging. On the West Coast, Oakland, California is experiencing food insecurity driven by the nation's highest housing costs and growing inequality. The Bay Area's extreme cost of living means that even middle-income families struggle to afford adequate nutrition after paying for housing. The region's frequent wildfires have disrupted local agriculture and food distribution networks. Gentrification has pushed low-income residents farther from established food resources. Cultural barriers and immigration concerns prevent some communities from seeking available assistance. Despite California's agricultural abundance, distribution problems mean that fresh produce often doesn't reach the urban residents who need it most. Las Vegas, Nevada faces unique food security challenges as a desert city heavily dependent on imported food. The tourism-based economy creates feast or famine income patterns for many workers, making consistent food access difficult. Water scarcity threatens both local agriculture and the food processing industries that rely on abundant water. The city's rapid growth has outpaced food assistance infrastructure. Extreme heat makes food storage and distribution particularly challenging during summer months. The transient nature of both the population and workforce creates gaps in community support systems that might otherwise help address food insecurity. Minneapolis, Minnesota confronts severe food insecurity despite being surrounded by some of America's most productive farmland. Harsh winters create special challenges for food distribution and for residents with limited transportation options. The city's large immigrant population faces cultural and language barriers in accessing food assistance. Recent social unrest has accelerated the closure of some urban grocery stores, creating new food deserts. Climate change threatens regional agriculture with increasingly unpredictable weather patterns. The contrast between abundant agricultural production and urban food insecurity highlights distribution and economic access problems rather than actual food scarcity. Rounding out our list, Brownsville, Texas has become ground zero for hunger in America. Located at the southern border, this city faces unique challenges that have made food insecurity the norm rather than the exception. Agricultural labor shortages have reduced local food production while increasing prices. Immigration policies have created fear and prevented some residents from seeking food assistance they legally qualify for. Extreme weather events, including both drought and flooding, have disrupted local agriculture. Limited transportation infrastructure isolates many communities from food resources. Despite these challenges, community-based organizations are developing innovative approaches to food distribution that could serve as models for other struggling cities. What's causing this nationwide crisis? The factors are complex and interconnected. Climate change stands at the forefront, with extreme weather events becoming more frequent and severe. In 2025 alone, we've seen unprecedented flooding, drought, wildfires, and temperature extremes that have devastated crops across the country. These climate disruptions don't just affect current harvests, they create cascading problems throughout the food system. Supply chain issues continue to plague our food distribution networks. From transportation bottlenecks to labor shortages, getting food from farms to tables has become increasingly difficult and expensive. Recent tariffs have further complicated international food trade, causing prices to spike for imported foods that many Americans rely on. These supply chain disruptions hit urban areas particularly hard, as cities depend on complex logistics networks to feed their large populations. Federal funding cuts have created immediate crises for food assistance programs nationwide. The USDA recently halted $1 billion for hunger relief programs supporting local producers. These cuts couldn't come at a worse time, as inflation continues to drive up food prices while wages remain stagnant for many workers. The social safety net is fraying just when more people need it. Economic inequality remains a fundamental driver of food insecurity. While some Americans enjoy unprecedented prosperity, Others struggle with stagnant wages, insecure employment, and rising costs for housing, healthcare, and education. These economic pressures force difficult trade-offs, with food often being the most flexible part of a family's budget. So how can you tell if your city might be next? Watch for these warning signs: rising grocery prices that outpace national averages, grocery store closures, especially in lower-income neighborhoods, increasing lines at local food banks and meal programs, growing homeless populations, as housing and food insecurity often go hand in hand, extreme weather events that affect local agriculture or transportation infrastructure. What can you do to prepare and help? First, build a modest emergency food supply for your own household. Aim for at least 2 weeks of shelf-stable foods your family regularly eats. Support local food banks with donations of money, food, or volunteer time. They're on the front lines of this crisis. Consider starting or joining a community garden, which can provide fresh produce while building community resilience. Advocate for policies that address the root causes of food insecurity, from climate action to economic justice. Shop at farmers markets and join CSAs, community-supported agriculture, to strengthen local food systems. And perhaps most importantly, check on your neighbors. Food insecurity often hides behind closed doors, affecting people too proud or scared to ask for help. The emerging food crisis in America isn't inevitable. With awareness, community action, and policy changes, we can build a more resilient, equitable food system that ensures everyone has access to nutritious food. But the first step is acknowledging the problem and understanding its scope. The 16 cities we've highlighted today are canaries in the coal mine, warning us of challenges that could soon affect many more communities across America. Thank you for watching this important video. If you found it valuable, please like, subscribe, and share to spread awareness about this critical issue. And remember, food security begins at home, extends to our communities, and ultimately depends on the choices we make as a society. The time to act is now, before empty shelves become the new normal in your city too.